Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. July 4 wildfire in Grand Canyon is still burning. Questions about response still unanswered. The Dragon Bravo fire burns on the north rim of the Grand Canyon on July 30th, 2025. The Grand Canyon's remote north rim seems like a world away from its more famous south rim. Only a sliver of the nearly 5 million people who visit the national park each year make it here. At 8,000 feet above sea level, the north rim's broad plateaus that drop into the canyon are thickly forested with pine trees. Businesses of any kind are few and far between, making places like the Jacob Blake Inn a sort of beacon in the wilderness. It offers only the fresh cookies for at least 25 miles in any direction. And on a recent bustling Sunday, morning visitors lined up at the counter for these famous delicacies. One couple eagerly ordered a chocolate chip cookie and a chocolate parfait, and for good measure, an apple turnover for breakfast. But 2 months ago, it was a very different scene at Jacob Blake. Employees, guests, and residents were forced to hastily evacuate as a wildfire bore down. Melinda Rich Marshall's great-grandparents opened the inn more than 100 years ago. The business, which also includes a restaurant and gift shop, filled with Native American jewelry and other curios, largely depend on visitors to the national park. Over the 6 years, it has seen its share of wildfires. In my lifetime, I can think of like 6 that have created economic problems for our family and for Jacob Blake, says Rich Marshall. Days after they evacuated, a second blaze, the Dragon Bravo fire, exploded in size, closing the north rim indefinitely. Rich Marshall says she's had to refund about $350,000 in reservations. We don't know how to imagine what the winter's going to be like, because we don't know how we're going to actually make it through financially, she says. Right now, we're just really trying to be creative, just like our ancestors were. Scores of local businesses in northern Arizona's National Park Gateway communities like Jacob Blake have felt the pinch after a particularly damaging wildfire season. More than 200,000 acres burned on the north side of the Grand Canyon alone in July and August. Rich Marshall and others are pressing officials to reopen some northern rim viewpoints in hopes for a return of tourists this fall. But the ecological effects of the Dragon Bravo fire may be less dire than initially feared. Good for forest health. When we came into this, we were expecting to look at devastation, says T.J. Clifford, who led a crew of federal specialists known as a Burned Area Emergency Response Team. So I was more buoyant as soon as I flew over it and said, okay, we can do this. The Bayer team includes soil specialists, botanists, wildlife biologists, and others who assess a wide variety of possible wildfire damage to the national park and adjacent national forest. Clifford says their analysis found that nearly 3/4 of the area inside the Dragon Bravo's fire perimeter either did not burn or burned at low severity. And while some stretches do resemble the moonscape, with charred vegetation and thick ash coating the ground, he expects most of the area to recover quickly. My overall opinion is this was a good tool for forest health, he says. It's providing the diversity that we need out here. It's also showing that past fuel treatments and past wildlife did a good thing for preventing the devastating impact. Fire managers in the West often let lightning-caused wildfires burn under certain conditions for forest health, as they did early on with the Dragon Bravo fire, which was ignited by lightning on July 4th. In social media posts and public statements, at the time, the National Park Service said it was using what it called a confine and contain strategy. But when the weather shifted a week later, historically dry and windy conditions caused the fire to blow up. It destroyed the century-old Grand Canyon Lodge, perched on the north rim, along with employee housing and more than 100 park structures. Arizona elected leaders quickly called for investigations, but some say they are still waiting for answers. At this point, we have not received any information or any response that makes us think that they're even really fully grasping what occurred and how it occurred, says Arizona Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego. In July, he and the Democratic Senator Mark Kelly wrote a letter to Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum demanding answers about management of the fire. Republican Rep. Paul Gosar of Arizona has also requested more information, and Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs has also requested more information, and Democratic calls for independent investigation. The administration and the National Park Service really needs to answer what happened so we could potentially stop this from happening in the future, says Gallego. Since the lodge burned, Park Service officials have said they intended to fully suppress the Dragon Bravo fire from the start. And even though it is now all but extinguished, fire managers still have not declared it fully contained. In all, it has burned 145,000 acres and has cost nearly $130 million to fight. The Park Service would not agree to an interview for this story. But in an email statement, Grand Canyon National Park Public Affairs Officer Joel Baird said, an interagency review team will be delegated the task to provide a comprehensive evaluation of the fire's management and operational response. The national level reviews are thorough and can take months to complete. Jimmy Kimmel will be back on air on Tuesday, Disney says. Less than a week after it was taken off the air under pressure from the Trump administration, Jimmy Kimmel Live will return to late night on Tuesday. ABC parent company Disney confirmed. Disney pulled the comedian's show last Wednesday after Brendan Carr, chair of the Federal Communications Commission, condemned Kimmel's comments about Charlie Kirk's assassination. The comments in question from Kimmel, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang, desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points for it." Carr threatened Disney and ABC affiliates that carry Kimmel's show, encouraging stations to preempt the late-night program. Nexstar, which owns stations across the country and needs FCC approval for a multi-billion-dollar merger with media company Tegna, quickly pulled the program. Last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country, Disney explained. In a statement provided to NPR. The company cited concerns that some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. After engaging in thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, Disney stated that they have decided to resume production of the show. Kimmel's suspension sparked widespread outrage. On Monday, hundreds of entertainers, including Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda and current Marvel and Star Wars star Pedro Pascal, both with long-standing professional ties to Disney, signed an open letter condemning the company's decision. The letter stated in part, "This runs counter to the values our nation was built upon and our Constitution guarantees. Regardless of our political affiliation or whether we engage in politics or not, we all love our country. We also share the belief that our voices should never be silenced by those in power. Because it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us." When will fall foliage peak near you? Here are some leaf peeping predictions. This animated map shows fall leaf colors projections from SmokyMountains.com. Red indicates peak color. It's officially fall in the northern hemisphere, which means bright, beautiful foliage isn't far behind. Parts of the U.S. will soon start to see, if they haven't already, leaves and shrubs trade their green hues for vibrant shades of orange, yellow, and red as the days get shorter and temperatures get chillier. It's a really cool process that we get to watch. The trees are preparing for winter, says Alexander Kosiba, Extension Assistant Professor of Forestry at the University of Vermont. Trees shed their leaves in order to store and recycle valuable nutrients in their trunks and branches before winter's ice and snow can rip them off. As temperatures drop, chlorophyll, the pigment that makes leaves appear green, starts breaking down, revealing the yellows and oranges they've had all along. Leaves typically start to change color in the northernmost states by mid-September, peaking around the end of the month and later farther south. This year, Almanac predicts that leaves in northern areas of the West and Midwest will peak by October 4th. While much of New England and the Pacific Northwest will be at or near peak fall color by October 11th, followed by the Blue Ridge Mountains. Multiple fall foliage maps include from Explore Fall, the SmokyMountains.com, and Almanac do their best to estimate when leaves will change and colors will peak across the country. A helpful resource from leaf peepers and autumn enthusiasts hoping to make most of the season. A view of the fall foliage in Vermont and New Hampshire in mid-October 2024. Leaves start changing in different locations across the U.S. in September and October, based on factors like temperature, elevation, and rainfall. But projecting peak foliage isn't an exact science. The timing and onset of the color change vary by location, based on factors like temperature, elevation, rainfall, and pests. No one can predict fall foliage. We just have to sort of let it unfold, Kasiba says. We can use research and monitoring to inform what we think is going to happen. But it's really this incredibly unique process that happens, and we get to experience it. Kosiba says online trackers can be helpful for understanding long-term patterns, though they don't capture local nuances. She recommends that people monitor updates from their state's forest health agency for real-time observations in their area and prepare to do a little local exploring this fall. even if they're not planning a full-fledged fall road trip. If you're in a location and it's looking a little dull, go a little further afield. Go to a different location, and you might find some really good fall foliage developed, she says. Climate change is delaying color change. Fall scenery in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Researchers have found that their weather conditions in previous seasons can also affect the timing and intensity of leaf color changes. A tree's recent past can dictate how vibrant or muted its leaves are in the fall. And in a colorful contradiction, warmer spring temperatures can trigger trees to start in the fall foliage process earlier. While warmer fall temperatures can delay the onset of color changes, in general, we are seeing fall foliage is occurring later than it has historically based on global climate change, Kosiba says. But every year can be really different, depending on the spring, summer, and fall conditions that occur. Kosiba says that climate change has delayed fall foliage by about a week, since experts started monitoring it in the mid-20th century. Around that time that leaf peeping entered the modern lexicon. These days, fall foliage related tourism generates some $8 billion in New England annually, according to the National Park Service, with visitors flocking to towns, mountain ranges, and national parks to take in the views. Peak foliage usually lasts 7 to 10 days. According to Almanac, the weather conditions can make a big difference. Kosiba says the wind and heavy rain can cut a fall foliage season short, while the idyllic combination of warm, sunny days and cool nights can significantly prolong it. Making the most of peak foliage. A view of colorful trees on a residential street in Palo Alto, California, in late November 2024. New England is currently experiencing drought conditions despite a wet spring and early summer, which is causing leaves in some places to turn brown and shrivel up. But in other cases, Kosiba says minor drought can actually make some leaves turn an even deeper red. Kosiba says parts of New England, like where she is in Vermont, are seeing the onset of fall foliage about a week earlier than expected. But the region's varied topography and rainfall patterns make it hard to paint with a broad brush. So we'll see in some places where the soil is very shallow and rocky that we are seeing early leaf drop, she says. And then on the other side of a hill, very close to that location, we might see an area that's really green and hasn't even started the fall foliage process. If you're worried about missing peak northeast foliage or planning a last-minute leaf peeping trip, Cosiba's advice is just keep driving south. Southern New England and parts of mid-Atlantic may not see their colors peak until October or even November. My thought, personally, because I love the fall foliage season, is that it's always good somewhere. She says, so if it seems a little brown where you go a little bit to a different location. Even if you're staying local, there are a few tricks you can try to get a more colorful view. Cosiba recommends going to a higher elevation, especially if you're in a dry place. Wetlands can be a great place to look for fall foliage, especially for deep reds. And don't forget to look down. We often think of fall foliage on trees, but a lot of our shrubs in our forests, even our ferns, turn really nice colors. A category that includes ferns and mosses. There's usually something good to see somewhere. Man charged with attempted assassination of Trump rests his own case. Ryan Ruth, a man charged in the attempted assassination of Donald Trump last year, rested his case on Monday after only a few hours of presenting his own defense and calling 3 witnesses. Federal prosecutors rested their case Friday after spending 7 days presenting 38 witnesses who detailed what they say was Ruth's planned attack against the then presidential candidate as he golfed at his West Palm Beach club on September 15, 2024. Ruth has pleaded not guilty on all 5 counts. In court Monday, Ruth's lead-off witness was Michael McClay, a former Marine sniper who saw active duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. Ruth called him as a gun expert, but was cautioned by the court to restrict his questions to a sniper's tactics and positionings. Throughout the morning, U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon repeatedly interrupted Ruth as he questioned his witnesses, warning the non-lawyer to follow federal judicial rules. Ruth, who is representing himself in the trial, after he told Judge Cannon he was unhappy with his court-appointed lawyers, has pleaded not guilty. McClay said that when he test-fired the SKS rifle left at the scene several months after Ruth's arrest, it malfunctioned. The gun fired, but the second round in the magazine repeatedly jammed. Prosecutors attributed that the effects of acid used by investigators to recover the gun's obliterated serial numbers. In questioning, McClay Ruth seemed to indicate that an attempt on Trump's life may have been planned while he was golfing on the fifth hole, not the green of the sixth hole. Ruth asked whether wouldn't it be more fitting to use a rifle scope at 370 yards of the distance of the fifth hole than 40 yards the distance from the sniper's hide. To the sixth hole, McClay said. Yes. When Ruth asked his witness whether the rifle would be able to hit a target 375 yards away, the former Marine sniper said, depending on the skill of the shooter, yes. Ruth's other witness, two former friends from North Carolina, were called to testify to what said is his peacefulness, gentleness, and nonviolence. He became frustrated, though, by the prosecutor's objections and Judge Cannon's admonitions to follow judicial guidelines. The judge concluded Ruth's questionings of both witnesses after repeated warnings. Ruth said that he would not testify in his own defense and rested the case. Jurors are set to hear closing arguments on Tuesday.